Okay, so let's get into this. It's a story that sounds almost made up, right? The idea that one single mistake, a simple wrong turn down a street in Sarajevo, could be the spark that sets the entire world on fire. It's this incredible chain of events, so unlikely, so improbable, but it was very, very real.
So here's how we're going to break it down. We're going to follow that chain reaction step by fateful step. We'll start with that bungled assassination in Sarajevo, then we'll see how Germany gave Austria-Hungary a blank check for war, and finally, we'll watch as all the alliances and military timetables just drag the great powers of Europe into a conflict that would change everything. All right, picture this. It's June 28th, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who's next in line to the Austro-Hungarian throne, is visiting Sarajevo. The whole city is tense. But no one could have guessed that the day was about to become this shocking mix of incompetence, sheer bad luck, and ultimately, tragedy. Now, this is where it gets wild. The first attempt to kill the Archduke that morning, it's a total failure. An assassin throws a grenade, but it literally bounces off the Archduke's car and blows up under the next one. So, after this incredibly tense reception at City Hall, Ferdinand, against all advice, insists on visiting the men who were injured by that bomb. And that decision changes the entire plan for the route back. And this is the moment where everything changes. The guy in charge of security, the governor of Bosnia, Oskar Podjorek, is sitting right there in the car with the Archduke. But in all the chaos, he completely forgets to tell the driver that the route has been changed. So the driver, just following his original orders, makes a right turn onto a side street. Podjorek starts shouting at him, "What is this? This is the wrong way." The driver slams on the brakes, and as he's trying to throw the car in reverse, the engine stalls. And can you guess where the car stalls? Right in front of a cafe where a totally dejected 19-year-old assassin, Gavrilo Princip, had gone to grab a sandwich after the failed attempt that morning. He couldn't believe his luck. He just steps up, pulls out his pistol, and fires. Podjorek, the governor, was consumed by guilt. I mean, this quote really tells you everything about the vengeful mindset he and others in Vienna would carry forward from this moment. The assassination sends these huge shockwaves through Vienna. For the hardliners, the war hawks in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, this was it. This was the perfect excuse to finally crush their neighbor Serbia. But they knew they couldn't do it alone. They absolutely needed the full backing of their powerhouse ally, Germany. And that brings us to the next critical step. This is what historians call the blank check. It's pretty much what it sounds like. On July 5th, Austria sends an envoy to Berlin to meet with Kaiser Wilhelm II. The question was simple. If we attack Serbia, and that brings in Russia, will you have our back? The answer from Germany was a loud, clear, unconditional yes. Go for it. And here's the crucial part. Germany wasn't just a passive supporter. Oh no, the German leadership was actively pushing Vienna towards war. They were worried their only real ally, Austria-Hungary, was starting to look weak. Plus, a lot of the German military command felt a big war with Russia was coming anyway, and they figured, you know what, 1914 is a better time to fight it than a few years from now. So, with Germany's full support locked in, Austria-Hungary's next move was crystal clear. They weren't really interested in justice for the Archduke, they wanted justification for invasion. The plan? Send Serbia an ultimatum so harsh, so humiliating, that there was just no way any self-respecting country could ever accept it. But here's the thing, they waited for 3 whole weeks. Why? Well, 2 main reasons. First, they wanted to get the summer harvest in so the troops would be ready to mobilize. Second, and this was clever, they waited for the president of France to finish a state visit to Russia. They didn't want the 2 allies coordinating their response face to face. That delay, though, cost them any sympathy they might have had on the world stage. When the ultimatum finally dropped on July 23rd, the terms were just breathtaking. A lot of it was tough, but the last couple of demands were the real poison pills. They demanded to allow Austro-Hungarian officials to operate on Serbian soil and help with the investigation. For any independent country, that's an absolute non-starter. It was a total violation of their sovereignty. And this just says it all. Even one of the Austrian diplomats who helped put this thing together admitted what the real goal was. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a trap. Serbia was given just 48 hours to respond. And you know what? They actually agreed to almost everything, except those points that would have erased them as a sovereign nation. For Austria-Hungary, that was good enough.
So, Serbia's partial rejection was exactly what Vienna wanted to hear. They cut off diplomatic relations immediately, and now that whole complex system of European alliances, the thing that was supposed to keep the peace, it was about to become a conveyor belt straight to war.
And right here, you can just see the dominoes start to fall. Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Then Russia, which sees itself as the big protector of all Slavic people, starts mobilizing its massive army to help Serbia. That makes Germany really nervous, so they tell Russia to stop. Russia refuses. And now France, because of its treaty with Russia, has to get ready to fight Germany. Just like that, a local crisis had officially gone continental. In these last frantic days of July 1914, this whole crisis is no longer in the hands of the diplomats. Nope. It's now being run by the generals and their incredibly rigid, complex mobilization timetables. And once you start those plans in motion, they are almost impossible to stop. I mean, just look at how fast this all happened. On the 29th, the first shots are fired on Belgrade. Russia at first tries to order just a partial mobilization aimed only at Austria-Hungary. But their generals basically tell the Tsar that's impossible and a terrible idea. They convince him it has to be a full general mobilization. And that decision, on July 30th, that is the final trigger for Germany. So this is a really important distinction to get. Back then, military leaders saw partial mobilization as a kind of warning shot. But general mobilization, that was seen as the real deal. It was basically the same as a declaration of war. Once Russia went for general mobilization, Germany believed it had no choice but to activate its own war plan, a plan that involved smashing France first before turning to Russia. With Russia and Germany now locked in, the final dominoes fell with just terrifying speed. Declarations of war started coming not in days, but in hours. An entire continent that had been more or less at peace for a century was about to plunge into the abyss. It all starts here, on July 28th. The war that Austria-Hungary and Germany had hoped would stay small and local is now official. The first domino has well and truly fallen. Just 3 days later, the conflict explodes. Germany sees Russia's general mobilization as an act of war, and on August 1st, Berlin declares war on the Tsar. The massive Eastern Front is now a reality. Germany's whole strategy for winning a two-front war, the famous Schlieffen Plan, depended on one thing: knocking out France fast. So just 2 days later, August 3rd, they declare war on France. The Western Front is now inevitable. And this is the final piece that makes it a true world war. To get to France, German troops invade neutral Belgium. Violating that treaty gives Britain, which had been on the fence, the reason it needed. On August 4th, Britain declares war on Germany, and with the full might of the British Empire now in the fight, the European war was officially global. Which brings us right back to where we started. Was it really just one wrong turn in Sarajevo? Or was that just the random spark that landed on a continent that was already piled high with dry timber? A continent full of rigid alliances, nationalism, and leaders who saw war not as a catastrophe to be avoided, but as a political tool to be used. It was a single moment of pure chance, followed by a month of deliberate, disastrous choices that led Europe and the world into darkness.